Okay, this is lesson 5.3, and we're talking about writing proportions now. And it says one way to write a proportion is to use a table. So you use the columns or the rows to write a proportion. Now remember that the proportion is just like two fractions that are equal to each other. So literally you could take that table and just write each of those as fractions and make sure to put an equal sign between them. Because it is a proportion, it has to be two ratios set equal to each other. So they use the columns in their first way of doing this. 2 ringtones per $6 equals 3 ringtones per X dollars. Or they could have used the rows. 2 ringtones to 3 ringtones is the same as $6 to X dollars. Either way is fine, but if you stick with one way, then you'll probably get them right. In example 1 here, writing proportion, it says a chef increases the amount of ingredients in a recipe to make a proportional recipe. The new recipe has 6 cups of black beans. Write a proportion that gives the number X of tomatoes in the new recipe. So you take the original recipe, 1.5 cups per 1 tomato, and you put in the new recipe amount, 6 cups per X tomatoes. Once you have them in the table, it's pretty easy to write it as a proportion. 1.5 cups per 1 tomato equals 6 cups per X tomatoes. We could have gone with rows, but it's so nice and easy to do this just in the columns. So you have cups per tomato, cups per tomato. I've included example 1 on this slide so that you can do these problems. When you write a different proportion that gives the number X of tomatoes in a new recipe, this time think rows. And write a proportion that gives the amount Y of water in the new recipe, and you'll have to go back and look at the original recipe to be able to do that. Now try these. In example 2, solving proportions using mental math, we just have 3 over 2 equals X over 8. Well, this is pretty easy. You look at the bottom and you go, well, how did I go from 2 to 8? You multiplied by 4, of course. So then you multiply the top by 4. Hopefully this reminds you of just equivalent fractions. It's not equivalent fractions. It's proportional ratios. But proportional ratios is basically equivalent fractions. So yes, you multiplied the bottom by 4 to get 8, so you multiply the top by 4 to get 12. For example 3, solving proportions using mental math, it said in example 1 how many tomatoes are in a new recipe. So we have the proportion that we wrote down, 1.5 over 1 tomato equals 6 cups over X tomatoes. So you think, what times 1.5 equals 6? 4 times 1.5 equals 6. So then you go to the denominator, 1 times 4 equals 4. Because the product of 1.5 and 4 is 6, then you multiply the denominator by 4. And you find that 1 times 4 equals 4. So 4 tomatoes. Now you solve these proportions on your own using mental math. When you're going to solve these problems, 4 through 7, you need to remember that to write a proportion, you're going to need like 2 fractions, and you also need to remember that percent means per 100. So for instance, in number 4, when it says 40%, you could write that as a fraction, 40 per 100, and that'll be one side of your proportion.